All right, I guess I talk a little bit too much. I got cut off in the middle of that one. So we are taking the square root of both sides, and we got x plus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 8. Don't forget that plus or minus. We lose our two answers if we don't do that step right there. All right, finish up solving this problem. Subtract 7 from both sides, and 8 minus 7 is 1. Negative 8 minus 7 is negative 15. These are our two answers, and we can always plug them back in up there and make sure that they equal 0 when we put them on the left-hand side. All right, our next example has a minus in it just to show you, but all of the steps are the same. So we've got k squared minus 12k. We're going to move the 23 over to negative 23 on the other side before we decide what goes in the box. To figure out what goes in the box, remember, we take half of this number, and we can even write it the next step as we go. When we cut it in half, we get negative 6. When we square it, we get plus 36. Don't forget to write these on both sides, though, because a lot of times people forget on this side, and then you don't get the right answer. All right, negative 23 plus 36 is 13. I already factored this as I did it, so now I'm ready to go ahead and square root both sides. Now this time, the square root of 13 is not a perfect square, so we just get to leave it as the square root of 13. Last step, add 6 over. We're almost done. 6 plus or minus the square root of 13 are the two answers. 6 plus the square root of 13, 6 minus the square root of 13. You can write it like this for me anytime, but just so you know, that is the two separate answers, 6 plus the square root of 13, 6 minus the square root of 13. If you wanted to know the approximate decimal for that, you can type those in, but this is a more exact answer. Also, Apex sometimes likes to put the square root first, so it would be the square root of 13 plus 6 or negative square root of 13 plus 6. Remember, the 6 number is positive because we're adding that over from x, and the plus or minus goes on the square root. So make sure you have that part down on those Apex quizzes. They might ask you what the two solutions look like. All right, the next one we have here has an odd number. So we're going to do exactly the same thing again. Make the space first. Make sure you show your work and don't be lazy about these steps. Move the 5 over, add 5. So that's positive. I don't care if you show me that step. Show me this step. What goes in this box? And on this one, it's going to be a fraction because this is an odd number. So when we cut 5 in half, we get 5 halves. Keep it a fraction. And then we're going to square it. When you square a fraction, you square the top. 5 squared is 25. And you square the bottom. 2 squared is 4. So we're adding 25 fourths to both sides. Now, if you're good at your fractions, you can maybe do that. I'm going to take a little side trip because we need to add, which means we need a common denominator of 4. And this one's already 25 fourths, but we need to add 5 whole and turn it into fourths. 5 times 4 is 20. So we've got 20 fourths plus 25 fourths, which is 45 fourths. So that's what goes on this side. And now I'm ready for my next step, which is, hopefully you got this, take the square root of both sides. When I take the square root of the squared thing, they cancel. When I take the square root of 45 fourths, we're going to get plus or minus, but this one's a little bit tricky. When you have, and this is the reason we keep it as a fraction, not a decimal, because if you square root this decimal, you're not going to get a nice answer. First of all, square roots can be separated over tops and bottoms of fractions. And we know the square root of 4 is 2. So that's why one of the number one reasons why we want it to be a fraction. On the top, we've got square root of 45, but that can break down into 9 times 5. And 9 is a perfect square. So you can take the square root of 9 out of there, keep the 5 inside, and we have the 2 on the bottom. That's what I'm looking for that part of the answer. Last step, we need to subtract that 5 halves over to the other side so that we have x equals, and we have a negative 5 halves plus or minus 3 root 5 over 2. This is an excellent answer. Or because it's a fraction with a common denominator of 2, we can sandwich them together like this and have them both be over 2. Or you could write them as separate ones, or you could put the square root first. There's many different variations, but make sure your plus or minus stays on the 3 root 5. We cannot add any of these front numbers and